Week 2, Thursday night football, Miami Dolphins fans. How are we doing? It is Ben Morgan of the Fins Up Network. We have got a lot to get to today. We're going to take a dive into the injury report real quick because it features running backs 1 and 2. We're going to break down the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills, talk about what we can expect to see on Thursday night, week 2 action. We're going to dive into everything here in just 1 second. But before we do, I want to hear from you. I want you to drop any questions that you would like answered in this week's final preview and prediction video. Go ahead and drop them in the comments. This week is a little bit weird, obviously playing on Thursday already, but get those questions submitted. I actually already put a request out on the Fins Up Network YouTube community page as well. So thanks. I already saw a couple come in. Thanks to you guys that have already submitted them there. But if you're watching this and have a question you would like addressed in that video, go ahead and drop it in the comments. But we talked about that injury report, and I'll pop it up here. As always, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this injury report. We're going to get a clearer picture on everything injury related tomorrow. But a couple of quick things to point out. And like I said, yes, both Raheem Mostert and Achane listed as DNPs. Now, Monday is an estimation of attendance since they had the day off and Tuesday was a walkthrough. But I talked about this earlier this offseason after we drafted Jaylen Wright. I said, you know what? I like this pick because if something happens to Mostert or Achane, we don't really need to change up the offense all that much if we insert Jaylen Wright. If he can pick up on the playbook and the nuances of the position at the next level kind of quick. Well, I say that kind of meaning that, you know what, we could live with it if Mostert or Achane would have gotten hurt. Not necessarily both. I'm not a huge fan of seeing both of them being a DNP on this list. So quite honestly, like I said, we'll get more clarity tomorrow. But if neither can go, you've got Jeff Wilson and Jaylen Wright as the only remaining running backs on your roster. Jaylen Wright was basically a healthy scratch last week. Look for him to be active. And then you've got Deneric Prince as the only running back currently on our practice squad. So depending on what happens with Mostert and Achane, look for him to potentially be elevated as well. And then to wrap up the Bills' perspective on the injury report, defensive back Teron Johnson was already ruled out. We're actually going to talk about more about that tomorrow's video. I saw a question come in about him already. And then quarterback Josh Allen has been cleared with the injury that he has to his non-throwing hand. Like I said, we'll talk more about that kind of stuff in tomorrow's video as well, but I want to talk more about those keys to the game. I got a couple offensively and defensively. First, offensively, can we just get Tyreek and Uber to the game? That's not one of my real ones, but can we? I do want to say it was shared with me that the Dolphins had like a very internal conversation. The ownership, front office, coaching staff, they all support the players in this manner, but they were told to the players essentially, let's not try to escalate any future situations. Like, just play by the rules. Don't do anything dumb. Let's not stop making distractions, essentially. I don't want to spend any more time on this, but this is essentially what the coaching staff is saying. Happened 3 hours before the game, became the story of Sunday, and now what? It's Tuesday afternoon. And we're still talking about statements that the Dolphins put out, statements that Tyreek puts out, statements that the cops put out, all the footage that has been coming out about everything. Try to limit these distractions was the message from the Miami Dolphins. So, yeah, it's very obvious, but there was a conversation to be had about this to the entire team. But my first true key to the game offensively, keep Greg Rousseau off quarterback 1, off Tua Tagovailoa. We talked last week about how the Jaguars had the league's top sack-producing edge rushers last year in Josh Hines-Allen. Second week in a row we get to play against Josh Allen. And then Trayvon Walker. Allen didn't have any statistical sacks on the day, but he created some issues. He had his presence felt a few times in that game. But Trayvon Walker ended up with 2. I believe he was one that had the sack that took us out of field goal range in that game as well. Well, now we turn our attention to the Bills and Greg Rousseau, who was an absolute madman against the Arizona Cardinals last week. Listen to this. 3 sacks, 2 quarterback pressures. Talk about filling a stat sheet. 3 sacks, 2 quarterback pressures, 6 tackles, 3 tackles for a loss, and a forced fumble on one of the sacks that he had. And keep in mind, that was against Kyler Murray. one of the more elusive quarterbacks in the entire game. I watched his sacks back and some of his plays. He ended up having sacks from both sides of the line of scrimmage. He ended up showing pretty good speed, power, bend coming around the edge, better than what it even was back when he was in college. So he's taking those steps forward, definitely working on establishing being one of those better all-around up-and-coming edge rushers in the NFL. So kind of once again, as we've seen with Mike McDaniel, when the Dolphins have faced some of the better edge rushers in the NFL, McDaniel's tried to get Tua to get the ball out of his hands quick. He's brought in Ingold and tight ends to chip on those edges, especially if it's going to end up being on Austin Jackson's side. We talked about him rushing from both sides. I also think there's a chance maybe we see a bigger commitment to the run game, attempt to try to keep those edge rushers at bay. Don't let them be flying off the edge every single snap. But I say that knowing is that in limbo now with running backs 1 and 2 looking questionable at best for a Thursday night. Like I said, we'll dive into that more tomorrow. We're going to take a drink break. Got a little bit of allergy, head cold thing going on. So don't mind the voice too much. I think I made it worse there. All right, this next one I'm going to label vertical is greater than horizontal. Now, I know there is a time and place for screen passes, for balls that go out wide. I get all of that. Getting the ball to playmakers out wide before relying on them to turn up. I get that's a part of Mike McDaniel's offense that can't be ignored. This week, I want to see less of an emphasis on these horizontal plays and more of an emphasis on these traditional down the field type of offense plays. Of Tua's 37 pass attempts last week, I think it was 18 attempts that were 5 yards or less down the field. Basically from the line of scrimmage on 5 yards, 18 attempts. 14 of them were either right at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. Now, I know a part of the reason is what we just talked about. You make up for some deficiencies along the offensive line by having those shorter passes. I get that, but that is way too many pass attempts being thrown at or near the line of scrimmage. That type of offense is not sustainable over the course of 17 games. I would like to see these screen passes, these shorter plays, used in more of a strategic manner rather than being a staple of our offensive game plan. I would like to see in these third and short situations, one of them that comes to mind, when we passed the ball last week, we sprung Jonnu Smith out, we sprung Achane out. Jonnu Smith is Achane's lead blocker, gets the ball out to Achane. Jonnu's got to hit his block. Other guys got to hit their block. Quite often in that situation, Achane still's got to make a guy miss. That's too much going on a 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 3 type of situation. Trust your offense. You have a good offense. Stop trying to get cute with these plays. Run your typical offense. Get the necessary yards, regardless of what the down and distance is. Just stop being so damn cute. Let's talk about the defense. All right. I'm labeling this as being prepared on crucial down because quite honestly, when we look at keys defensively, whenever you play the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen's name gets brought up, and it's a lot of the times it's what he does with his legs. And we're going to talk more about that. I actually saw one question already come in for tomorrow's video as well. But I know this is a small sample size. But I looked at their week 1 game against the Cardinals. He only ran for 39 yards on 9 attempts. So you stat watch, you look at the stats and say, that's not really going to kill you. But the issue is, it's what he was able to do with those runs in the situations where they happened. 2 of his runs were from inside the 10-yard line, basically goal-to-goal type situations that resulted in rushing touchdowns for Josh Allen. So as efficient as you can possibly be. 2 more of the carries came on 4th downs. Both of them ended up in converting to become 1st downs. They only went for 1 and 5 yards, but quite honestly, that's all he needed. So the yards weren't there, but the efficiency was there because you went from 4th down to extending the drive and getting those new 1st downs. Another one of his rushing attempts came on a 3rd and 2 situation late in the game, which means only 2 of his carries ended up coming on 1st downs. So based on, yes, albeit a very small sample size, Josh Allen is doing what he said he wanted to do earlier this offseason. He wanted to stay in the pocket. He wanted to make plays down the field. He didn't want to do as much with his legs as a runner. But when the down and distance is kind of at critical juncture, the coaching staff, they tend to let him improvise, be that big bodied mismatch at quarterback that he is. So this is not to say that he's never going to run on an early down and we shouldn't be prepared for it. We always got to be prepared for mobile quarterbacks in today's NFL. But I think extra emphasis needs to be given to Josh Allen when it's these plays inside the 10-yard line and when it's third and fourth and 1 and 2. Those type of situations, we need to be aware that Josh Allen is more likely to run right there. Let's do one more drink. Battling through it. I'm questionable in the injury report. Should have had my name on there. All right. I was curious to see how the Bills would fill the void left by Stephon Diggs this offseason. At one point, they were tied to Brandon Ayuk. Obviously, that didn't happen. Completely pivoted. They ended up drafting Keon Coleman early in the second round. They added a few free agents as well. Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, Marquez Valdes-Scantling as well. So much different types of wide receivers than Stephon Diggs. He's always kind of been that alpha number one type of wide receiver. Now, once again, what I'm going to say here is a small sample size. It's only week 2 right now. They opted to spread the wealth last week against the Cardinals. 9 different players caught passes. Their leading wide receiver was Keon Coleman. He went 4 for 51. It was Khalil Shakir and Mac Hollins who caught the touchdowns, despite the 2 of them only combining for 5 catches for 67 yards. And then we talked about them bringing in Curtis Samuel. He had 15 yards on 2 catches. So no one dominated targets. No one dominated production from an outright pass catching perspective. But the one constant was once again James Cook, because we saw James Cook get more involved last year once Ken Dorsey was shown the door. James Cook got a bump in touches, and he ended up getting that in week 1 as well. 22 touches, 19 carries, 3 receptions, 103 total yards. Now, he did only average 3.7 yards per carry against the Colts. But as you know, with running backs, a lot of the time it's simply committing to the ground game, making that opposing defense respect that ground game, open things up in play action in the passing game in general. Now, while we did do a solid job, I would say, in limiting Travis Etienne on the ground last week, Tank Bigsby did give us some issues, especially in the first half. So I'm going to label James Cook as one of those guys that's probably going to get a lot of touches again, and a guy that we're going to have to try to limit the production of. Dolphins fans, I'm going to wrap it there for today. But like I said, drop any questions you've got for this week's final preview and prediction video. Go ahead, drop them in the comments. As always, we'll get to as many as we possibly can. Thank you once again for your time. Thank you for putting up with the voice. If you haven't gotten subscribed yet, would definitely love it if you did that. Thanks as always to those that already have. We will wrap it there for today, Miami Dolphins fans. But until next time, fins up.